through some of them fairly quickly. We talked a little bit earlier. Currently, at my border, my 100 miles of the Mexican border, we have a massive amount of immigrants coming, not from South or Central America, but from disparate places. And I'll just take one example. The people coming there from China, over 20,000 of them in the last month, they flew typically to Turkey, then to Mexico, and then came into the United States. Turkey does not allow Chinese to enter Turkey without a visa. Mexico does not allow people to enter, including Chinese, without a visa. However, they are currently entering because they say, oh, just let us off the plane and we'll go to America. As our head diplomat with these two allies, one of them a NATO ally, can you or will you attempt to tell them that under international law, if they don't have a visa to the United States, you do not want them to come to make a claim that they could have or should have made before they got to our border?
Yeah. In short, yes. I think you've identified a very important problem. You mentioned the case of China. We have a record increase in the number of Chinese who are seeking to get into the United States, who presented themselves in one way or another. And there are other nationalities, too, that are far afield from our own hemisphere.
I mentioned China mostly because, as we both know, they won't take them back once they get here.
So you identified an important problem, and we've been acting on it. We've been working with countries in the region to get requirements for visas so that people can't simply come to those countries without a visa and then use that as a platform to come into the United States. We've reached agreements in a variety of ways with Colombia, with Ecuador, with El Salvador, with Guatemala, with Mexico, actually, as well as with Panama. And we continue to make sure that, to the best of our ability, those countries put in place what's needed so that people from far afield can't avail themselves of the opportunity to use it.
Excellent. Thank you, Secretary. As I said, I've got a bunch here.
Please.
Hopefully, what we passed out of the committee this morning, giving export controls for AI, will be a tool that will be used heavily out of commerce and will benefit our war against a number of countries. And I'm going to just deal with one for a moment. When President Biden entered office, there were about 300,000 barrels a day leaving Iran. Today, there are reported to be over 2 million barrels a day leaving Iran. They had about 70 ships. They now have about 400 ships. They're called ghost ships. I know that you do not run a military force, but as our chief diplomat and a member of the National Security Council, couldn't or shouldn't we be able to essentially capture those ships on the high sea and take them out of commission to ultimately enforce sanctions? You're our number one sanction supporter, but your sanctions, now that they've circumvented SWIFT and the other economic trades, have become somewhat muted. What should we do in combination with the other entities?
Yeah, so I think there are a few things, Congressman. First, we have sanctioned in the oil, petroleum product sector more than 200 Iranian entities or individuals who've been engaged in that trade. We've done it across multiple jurisdictions. Anyone who has a role in the production, the sale, the shipment of these petrochemicals. Or
but, Mr. Secretary, the limited time, can you get to the ships?
Yeah, so on the ships, we've identified to date, through our laws, 50 vessels that we've determined are blocked property. In other words, people can't deal with them. They can't go to a port. They can't get serviced. And we'll continue on that effort to identify those vessels, block them. We're also looking at getting countries to deflag these vessels so, again, they won't be able to move around, travel around, get the services they need. The sanctions that we have imposed have made all of this a lot more expensive for the Iranians as they try to evade them, get around them. They're not getting the revenues that they anticipated getting from their massive efforts to sell oil.
Mr. Secretary, as I run out of time, let me just ask one final follow-up on that. I believe if Ronald Reagan were president or someone like him, those ships would not be on the high sea. Do you have or would you accept the authority from Congress, if you don't have it, to, in fact, seize those clandestine ships as Ronald Reagan would have? Remember, Ronald Reagan sunk 2 Iranian ships because of what they were doing. I believe strongly that if you don't have the authority, that Congress, on a bipartisan basis, would give you the authority to intervene, to capture those ships, to work with the flagged nations, to put all 400 out of commission. Will you commit to work with us on that effort?
Well, as I think you mentioned, or one of our colleagues mentioned, we don't actually have a military at the State Department, so that's not our business. Our focus is on working with other countries and using our own authorities in the areas that we can to go after anyone who's engaged in shipping, supplying, transporting these products, and that's what we'll continue to do.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes